Welcome, everybody, to the Performing Arts Series, which is being presented by the Kennedy Center and the Prince William Network. And for all of you here today in the audience and those of you who are viewing in, I want to welcome you. And for those of you who are viewing in, there will be an 800 number and an email address on your screen, so later in the program when you have questions you can ask. And those in the audience, I think you already know the format. You'll be able to come up and use the microphone. My name is Carla Maxwell. I'm the artistic director for the Limon Dance Company, and on behalf of the dancers with me, I want to say thank you for inviting us to be part of this. We are an international touring company based in New York. Our founding director was Jose Limon, who was born in Mexico in 1908 and passed away in, yes, little applause there, and passed away in 1972. So it's been almost 35 years since we have continued since his death, which is unusual. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary as one of America's foremost modern dance companies. Jose Limon was one of the greatest male dancers of the 20th century, as well as one of the founders of the American modern dance. And today we are going to share with you one of his masterpieces, the Moor's Pavane, which is based on the story of Othello, which I will be explaining as the lecture goes along, and also asking you also, how many of you have here read Othello? Any of you? Very few, okay. So this is a story about love and revenge, and I'll explain it, but we want to, there's a point when the dancers have to change costumes, so we want to make sure that they have time, and I'll go through the whole story then. But before we get going, I want to introduce the cast. First, Francisco Ruvalcaba, who will be dancing the role of the Moor. And he is from Mexico. Roel Sieber, who will be dancing the role of his friend. Ryoko Kudo, who will be dancing the role of his friend's wife. And Roxane d'Orléans-Juste, who will be dancing the role of the Moor's wife. So this is our cast today. These are the four protagonists, and I'm going to ask them to go and take their places now for the beginning of the lecture. I want to talk first about some of the choreographic elements that are used in all of Limon's work, and like music and painting, both of which he was very accomplished with, we use similar techniques: space, rhythm, and gesture. And I'm going to ask you, it's a little harder for those of you who are watching in on TV, but for those of you here, to think of this proscenium stage as a cube of space, because it has height and depth and width, and it also could have a texture. It's like the weather. It could be humid and oppressive. It could have a strong wind, which makes it difficult to move. It's an environment in which we enact out many things. And so how space is used in a composition, a choreographic composition, can tell you, it can block the action of the dance, because this is a story. It can show you relationships between people, how they're placed within this living canvas. Or it could create a mood for you, just by the energy and rhythm with which we move within it. So we're going to start with some very basic principles about space, and I'm going to ask Roxana to start, and she's going to be upstairs, and as you see her there in the space, you'll see that it's divided very equally, as though she's placed herself in that canvas. And just like in film, as she walks forward, she becomes more present. Now, in theater, we often think of this center line as the strongest place to be, because all energy is focusing into the center of the space. Now, as she recedes, she becomes less present. As soon as she moves to another place in this canvas, we have negative space here on the side of the stage. And she's still the important person, and she's drawing your attention, but suddenly her environment has changed. Just that simple move. So you know, if you've done your own paintings or drawings, how you set up the rhythm, and where you place things in the drawing are very important. So really, what Limón is doing, he's sculpting the space with the dancers. Pablo's walking a different dimension. He's giving us a diagonal. And now, as he and Roxanne move together, there's space between them. And that can become alive. And the closer they come, the more the space around them becomes alive as they become a fixed point in space. And then as they leave, it's almost like they're drawing a line. And there goes Roel. He's dividing the space differently. Again, a diagonal, and pulling it back. And Ryoko is giving us, again, the foreground, the downstage part. So she's giving us a different perspective. As soon as you start adding more people to the space, we have more possibilities for interaction, for relationships, for how the energy of the space changes. And we can begin to tell a story. One more thing we'd like to show you is how the space can expand and contract. So Pablo and Roel are starting. They're closing the space in, and they're dividing it evenly. And then they're going to separate. Don't worry, they're good friends. They're not going to attack each other now. Now, if Ryoko comes in, we still have this contraction of space, but we have that negative space downstage over on the other side. So there's something interesting about the unevenness of it, and it makes us feel a certain way. But if Roxanne comes in to balance that space, suddenly we have symmetry. And the space closes. And the space opens. You're going to see this formation happening many times in the dance. And we can change the tempo. They might rush in, and they might go slowly back out. These are all very simple things to do, but every single one of them creates a different effect to your eye and to your emotion. They might go back in slowly, pressing into the space. Gives a sense of mystery. We don't know what's going to happen. Or they might burst apart. Okay, thank you. So in the dance, the Moor's Pavane, we have these 4 characters. It's about a stranger, the Moor, who comes to a town where he's a foreigner, but he's in a Renaissance court. So what Mr. Limón did, he used this center place as their home. That's where the dance begins and ends, and where the dancers keep coming back. They're tied to each other. It's a dance about jealousy and intrigue, things we see and learn about and live every single day. So without doing any formal movement, I'm going to ask the dancers, just as, again, a demonstration of composition, to come in, and we're going to walk the space, but using our focus of how the dance begins to introduce the 4 characters. So there they are in their home place. And they turn and they greet each other. And they greet each other again. And they greet each other again. And then the whole form closes in. And then the men have something to say, and the women respond. And the men have something else to say, and the women respond. And the men go up to greet each other one last time, and everyone comes back to home base. Now, because this is, the idea of the dance is that it's happening in a court in Venice in the Renaissance time, Jose is using very ancient formal pavane, a walking dance. So we're going to do this without music. I'm going to keep a rhythm for them, just a pulse, and you'll see this as it does happen in the dance with their true gestures. and 1, 2. Go on, Ryoko, and 2. 2 and 3. 2 and 4. 2 and 1. 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Okay, thank you. This happens many times. Okay, that's just a little simple way, and as I keep explaining the characters, you'll see why this is very important, how they're moving. Rhythm. Rhythm is the thing that tells you how long an action will take. Rhythm is the thing that defines the amount of energy that a dancer will use to create a certain movement. Rhythm is also something that can define the environment. It helps define the intention of the movement, and it can also establish a mood. It's very important because rhythm isn't just keeping a beat, it's about texture and quality of movement as well. And for how many of you here study music? Okay, just a few. More than a few. So we can divide rhythm in what we call duple rhythm. It's even, 2s, 4s, 8s, and it's usually something like 1, 2, 1, 2. It's very even, and what we call in musical terms marcato. It's it's insistent, it's direct, and it lends itself to very clear, direct, punctual movement. We can also divide it into 3s. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It could be faster or slower, but that's what gives us a swing, so that you're falling and there's a suspension at the end, and it's moving through the beat. So that gives a different quality. Now, 3s could be 3s, or you could have something that involves both kinds of meter. That's what we're calling this division of time, which is what we call 6/8, which has a triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 1, 4, 1, 4. So the beat's a little stretched there, but you still have that swing underneath, that implication. Each one of those gives us, whether we recognize it immediately or not, it gives us a different emotional feeling. How fast or slow the movement goes also determines how much effort we have to use to create it. So I'm going to start by asking Roel and Pablo to show us one of their dialogues in the dance. And they're having an argument. And this is going to be very fast. And 1 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 4 and 2 and 5, 2, 6, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2 and 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 1, and 1. Okay, thank you. This duet happens in the middle of the dance. Roel is insistent on making sure that Pablo is hearing something very unpleasant. He doesn't want to hear it, and I'll explain more as we go. But so you have this insistence, this pushing, this drive in the movement. And again, Jose is using this diagonal. It's a direct way to move, but it's also giving you a long journey in the space. We, as dancers in our company, also talk about something called breath rhythm, which is not counted, and which we use to follow our inhalation and exhalation, how we breathe, and that determines how we move. I'm going to ask Roxana's made a little study of breath movement to show you an example not connected to the dance. So she's focusing on her breathing. And the slower she breathes, the slower she moves. This kind of movement also makes a beautiful succession through the body, from the center of the body out through the periphery. And it can take her into space. And as she moves more quickly, she has to use more effort. She has to breathe more quickly. And it can take her into jumping, running, and there she goes. Okay. So sometimes when we're moving slowly, even to music, which happens in this dance many times, we have to use the idea of this breath rhythm to pace the emotion that we're trying to convey. So I'm going to ask Pablo and Roxanne to show a conversation where they're speaking to one another and using this breath rhythm, which is coordinated with the music. Thank you. So quality of movement is rhythm, space, they all interact. You can't really have one without the other. Roel and Ryoko are very different than these two very direct communicators. They're not afraid to look in each other's eyes and tell each other what's in their heart. But Roel and Ryoko in this dance represent people who are always talking maybe out of the side of their mouth. Roel's character is always someone who's slithering up behind someone and whispering in their ear. He's an unpleasant character, you'll see. Not in real life, but in this dance he is. And so his wife, who's lived with him a long time, knows him very well. And so she has adapted to that way of listening and speaking to them. So in this particular conversation, Roel is trying to convince her that to do something that she'll do for him, but she's going to give him a hard time about it as well. So let's see how they communicate, using only peripheral energy, very rarely looking at one another. Thank you. So you see, their whole body has to be alive. Your body is a very rich instrument. It can be like an orchestra. Every part has to be tactile and alive to communicate. I'm going to ask Pablo and Roxanne to show another conversation in which you'll see Pablo's movement is very direct, strong, powerful, and Roxanne's is very round and gentle and fluid. Thank you. We have one other character in this dance, not a living one, but it's a handkerchief. And according to the story of Othello, this handkerchief was an heirloom given to him by his grandmother. And he was to present it to the woman he loved, but if she ever lost it, he would know that she not only didn't love him anymore, but that she had been unfaithful to him. So we're going to watch the passage of the handkerchief through the dance. It's another way that you can follow the drama today. But we've kind of made a Reader's Digest version for you, very shortened. It's out of context of the dance. So if the dancers would come in, and we'll just watch what happens to the handkerchief from the beginning to the end of the dance. So in the beginning, the Moor has this handkerchief, and he presents it to his wife. And she accepts it with all her love. However, his friend has other interests, and he would like to plant some seeds of doubt in his friend's mind. In a moment of not thinking and distraction, she loses that handkerchief, and her other friend finds that and gives it to her husband, who is then able to take that handkerchief and present it as evidence to the Moor that his wife has been unfaithful. And we'll stop right there. You'll see how it ends when we see the whole piece. Thank you. The dancers are going to get in full costume right now. They had some warm-up clothes over their costumes. So let me recap just for a moment. This is the Moor's Pavane, choreographed by Jose Limon in 1949, a very long time ago. It has music by Henry Purcell, arranged by Simon Sadoff, and this music was also written many, many, many years ago. And it is an evocation, it is an adaptation of the story of Othello, which is about a Moor from North Africa who finds himself in the court of Venice and becomes a great warrior and general. And he marries one of the most beautiful women in Venice. And they love each other very much, but he is a very jealous man. And his friend is very jealous of his position. And so he decides he's going to destroy this man because he knows that he's jealous, and how can he use it? So he finds out about this handkerchief, and he decides that if he can convince him that his wife has been unfaithful, he'll do something irrational out of his passions and cause his own downfall, which does happen. I think that Mr. Limon was creating this work really as an example of human nature, not of what should happen, but what does sometimes happen. And he always ends his dances, there's a question mark for you to choose yourself how you want to live your life and which of your passions you're going to explore. You'll see when they come back in full costume, the Moor will be in a deep burgundy costume, color of passion, of strength, of nobility. Desdemona will be in a white dress symbolizing purity, translucence, someone who you always can read her heart. There's nothing duplicitous about her. His friend Iago is in a kind of slimy gold and black like a snake. So he has these mixed colors. And his wife is in a burnt orange color, which is the color of flame. It's something that changes. And so the four of them never leave the stage. The whole dance happens in 21 minutes. And so with that, sometimes you'll see people standing in part of the stage as though they were in another room in conversation while main action is happening somewhere else. And that was a choreographic device that Jose uses so that you can see the four people all the time living through this drama. There's lots of room for interpretation for all of you. And it is a tragedy, but at the same time, it can be an instructive way to look at life. I don't see all our ladies and gentlemen back yet, almost. 1 minute they're giving me, 1 second. So I do want to say to the people who are tuning in right immediately after we run the dance, we'll be taking questions both from here in the auditorium, and if you can see on your screen, there's an 800 number and also an email address that you can contact us, and we'll be taking questions from around the country. So we are ready now. I'm going to come down in the house and join you for this. Please enjoy the Moor's Pavane by Jose Limon, and thank you. Thank you very, very much. Since we're getting very short of time, we want to invite our viewing audience to ask a question. And I think we're going to an email question first. Is that what I heard? Yes. What stories did Limón use for this dance? Anybody in the house want to answer that? He used the story of Othello, which was a legend, as well as a play by Shakespeare and an opera by Verdi. So do we have another question coming from the house? Use the mic, please. Go ahead.
What do you do each day to stay in shape to dance?
What do we do each day to stay in shape and dance? We practice many, many hours. Being a dancer is sometimes more strenuous than an athlete. The dancers take an hour and a half to 2 hour class a day, and we rehearse 6 hours minimum. Yesterday, longer. When we're on tour in performance, it's constantly working on your body. And the kinds of work we do is varied. Sometimes we have to stretch our muscles. Sometimes we have to strengthen them. We need flexibility. So there's a lot of texture changes we need to do, and the stamina it takes to maintain these dances is very strong. Another email question. What other artists did Limón admire? I think Limón had great respect for his contemporaries, Anna Sokolow, Anthony Tudor, Martha Graham in the dance world. But he started as a painter before he was a dancer. And his favorite painter was El Greco and Goya. So I think that he loved the classic works. He loved Michelangelo. He also loved music, particularly the Baroque. We have another question from the floor.
Have any of you studied ballet?
Yes, all of us study ballet as an addition to our training. Do we have another? Email. What is the significance of the handkerchief? The handkerchief is a symbol of the Moor's love for his wife. And it is, as I said, it's the fifth character in this play. If the dancers are ready, come on out. There might be specific questions for whoever's ready. We have another question? Yes.
Which cities has this company performed in?
Which cities?
Yeah, which other cities has this company
Oh my God, the company's been all over the world. I think we've been in all 50 states. I don't think I could name them all. We've been to South America, North Africa, Europe. Before I joined the company, the Limón Company toured all over Asia. So, internationally. Email. Do you have a favorite place you like to perform? Can I pass this to any of you want to answer? Ryoko.
Sometimes we have an opportunity to perform outdoors. They set up a stage, and that's when I like to perform very much. There's trees and sky above, and it's beautiful.
We have another, yes, from the floor.
Are there dancers you have inspired with, or a dancer you inspire especially?
What dancers have inspired any of you?
When I was in elementary school, I remember reading an article about Josephine Baker and about all the children in the world that she adopted and how much she loved dance and how much she had to study to make it and to be recognized, and she had to leave her home to be successful in what she had to do. And I thought she was a great inspiration when I was younger. And then all my colleagues and teachers and mentors and everybody I've met along my career have been my inspiration, really.
We have another? Yes.
If someone wants to be a modern dancer, what would you recommend they do?
Who wants to answer? If you want to, I think you should travel and first of all see as many performances as you can to see if the work speaks to you. because no matter who you work with, it's a very intense, labor intensive, but it has to be something from your heart. You have to really love to do this work. So you first want someone you identify with, but to try everything. If you're young, try everything and see what your body responds to also. And then you would go and try to study with those people who are creating the work you are inspired by. That's what Jose did. That's what all of his contemporaries did. In those days, when he was first starting, you know, they didn't get paid for rehearsals. They were lucky if they got paid for performing. So it really was something from the heart. One more, in email. Do you have a special interpretation of each of your characters? Yes. Do you want to quickly pass the mic? A few words.
I have to become very evil for my character, and that's not in my natural personality, so it's a bit of a shift for me.
I'd like to stay playful in my character, and I think I'm tricking my man when in fact I get tricked in the end.
I have to remain really open and loving and keep believing in my husband's love for me despite the fact that he feels betrayed. So that continuous wanting for him to believe me is something I have to concentrate on.
Interpretation, I don't know. I guess it's just trying to figure out how I would react to the information that I get, and see if that connects to the character. Because I think that's what we primarily have to do, is connect ourselves with what we're supposed to do, and I guess the dancing or the artistry happens between those two bridges.
From the floor?
Did Limón make other dances based on stories?
Yes, Jose Limon made many dances based on other stories. One is by a play by Eugene O'Neill called The Emperor Jones. He had many inspirations from religious themes. He did a piece called The Traitor, which was his own telling of the Christ and Judas story. But he was inspired by a very terrible period in our history in this country, the McCarthy era in the 1950s, where we had the House of Un-American Activities, where people were being called in as traitors because they might have registered for the Communist Party at one time. It was kind of a witch hunt time. And he was looking at the nature of that. He also had something based on our first biblical parents, Adam and Eve, a work called The Exiles. But he was also thinking about people who had been sent away from their home country as he had. So there's many times, and he also has done works without stories, based on music, or a beautiful mass that he made called Missa Brevis, short mass in time of war. So he has many themes. Email. What drew you to the type of dance rather than jazz or ballet?
Well, I started learning how to dance through jazz and tap and ballet. And then I came across modern dance when I was in college and the Limón technique through the school. And I identified with the meaning of the dances that he made and how it made me really learn more about myself. So that was, scary too, but very exciting at the same time.
We've run out of time, and we want to thank everybody who's come by satellite, by email, by TV, and all of you here for a wonderful performance. I know that there's going to be some credits, and we will have one more thing to share with the audience here. So thank you very much to the dancers as well as to the people who have come in for viewing. Go ahead and take your places. For those of you who are here, we thought it would be interesting to show you the very beginning of the dance, just because you've seen the whole story, and see if it has any different effect on you to close our program. So if you would start the music, we're going to just give you that.
If you didn't get a chance to ask a question today, contact us by using the email address on your screen. We'd love to hear from you. Visit the Kennedy Center for additional information about this and upcoming programs, as well as other resources on integrating the arts into your curriculum. Don't miss our next program on Friday, November 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern, featuring award-winning author Nikki Grimes discussing her well-known books, including What is Goodbye and Talking About Bessie.